I never believed in campfire rumors. Every base in Vietnam had them whispered stories traded between men, too tired to sleep but too wired to rest. Tales of haunted valleys, phantom soldiers, and shadows that moved against the wind. Most of us laughed them off. War was frightening enough without adding ghosts to the mix. But the one about the Forbidden Valley stuck around longer than the rest. They said even the Viet Cong didn't go near it, a stretch of jungle so thick the light barely cut through, where entire patrols vanished without trace. The brass called it superstition, but some officers quietly redirected maps so convoys would never pass that way. Problem was, the war didn't care about legends. And one wet morning in late '68, our convoy was ordered straight into the heart of it. We were running supplies, ammunition, rations, fuel drums lashed down in the back of battered trucks. About 20 men in total, a mix of grunts and drivers, plus a pair of gun jeeps riding point and tail. The road was a dirt track carved into the jungle, narrow enough that the branches clawed at our canvas covers as we rolled forward. Rain had turned everything into a slick mess, tires sinking into grooves, engines growling, as if they resented the work. Nobody spoke much. We all felt it, that weight pressing in as we crossed into the valley. Not just the jungle closing over us, but the silence. No birds, no insects, just the steady churn of engines and the occasional cough from exhaust pipes. A couple of the younger guys shifted nervously, their eyes darting to the tree line like they expected gooks to pour out at any second. But it wasn't ambush we feared. It was something else, something we couldn't name yet. Halfway in, the lead jeep sputtered, coughed, and died. The driver cursed, climbing out to check under the hood. We stopped in a staggered line, everyone stepping down into the mud. Cigarettes were lit. Rifles were slung loose over shoulders. Nobody wanted to stand too far from the trucks. The air smelled heavy, like rot and damp moss. That's when we heard it, a thud, deep and heavy, from somewhere beyond the tree line. Then another, slow, deliberate, like the earth itself was shifting. Men froze mid-breath. One of the sergeants hissed for silence, but nobody was making noise anymore. The jungle swallowed every sound we made, yet carried that rhythm clear as day. Thud, thud, closer now. The driver slammed the hood shut and muttered, "Let's move." Now he didn't care if the Jeep wasn't fixed, he wanted back behind steel. We all did. Engines growled back to life, and the convoy lurched forward, wheels flinging mud. For a few blessed minutes, it seemed whatever it was had stayed behind. But then came the scream. It wasn't human, too guttural, too raw, a sound that shook inside your chest like a mortar blast, primal enough to cut through every ounce of training we had. Men looked around wide-eyed, gripping rifles tight. The tail gunner swung his .50 toward the tree line, knuckles white on the grip. But the jungle stayed still, mocking us with its silence. Another thud hit the ground so hard I felt it through my boots. And then we saw it just for a second, between the trees. A massive shape, dark against the dripping green. Shoulders broader than any man, moving with terrifying speed despite its size. Someone whispered, "Jesus Christ, it looks like a gorilla," but older than the jungle itself. But it wasn't. Not like any gorilla we'd ever seen in books or zoos. This thing was taller, bulkier, its arms dragging low, its head tilted unnaturally forward as it paced us through the jungle. The convoy surged ahead, engines screaming as drivers floored it. The creature matched our speed with ease, never breaking stride, always staying just beyond clear sight. Every man felt it in his gut. This wasn't just an animal. It was something else, something that didn't belong in our world. We drove harder, mud spraying, nerves fraying, rifles trembling in sweaty hands. And though we wanted to believe we could outrun it, every man knew the truth sooner or later. The valley would demand its price, and that was only the beginning. We made it through the valley that day, but not clean. The convoy limped into the next outpost with blown shocks, cracked windshields, and drivers who couldn't unclench their hands from the wheel. Nobody spoke about what we'd seen in the tree line, at least not officially. The sergeant gave his report, chalking up the damage to road conditions and weather. But after dark, when the radios hissed low and the cigarettes burned down to ash, the whispers started again. That was my first trip into the Forbidden Valley, but it wasn't my last. The brass didn't care about rumors. Supply had to move, no matter what lived out there. Convoys were scheduled through that route every other week, and as long as trucks kept rolling, command didn't ask questions. Maybe they didn't want to know. Maybe they already did. I was 23 then, born in Ohio, raised working on my uncle's farm. The draft scooped me up the moment my number came, and before I knew it, I was shipping supplies halfway across the world. I wasn't infantry, not airborne, not special forces, just logistics. But in a war like Vietnam, the jungle didn't care about your patch or your orders. Out there, you either kept moving or the jungle swallowed you whole. The guys in my unit were a mixed bag. Most of us young, some barely shaving, some already tired of living. There was Harper, who carried a photo of his newborn daughter tucked in his helmet band. Morales, who never shut up about the diner he planned to open back in Texas. And Sergeant Blake, career Army, whose voice could cut steel and who never admitted fear even when it sat plain on his face. They were regular men, each one tough in his own way, but not built to wrestle with legends. And that's what the Forbidden Valley was, a legend. The locals wouldn't go near it. I remember one time at a village market, a young boy pointed at the map on my clipboard. His father smacked his hand away, muttering in broken English, "No go there. Not safe. Bad spirits." He wouldn't look me in the eye after that. The older villagers said nothing at all, just spat in the dirt when the valley came up. Soldiers laughed, called it jungle superstition, but laughter didn't stop hands from tightening on rifles when the tree line closed in. Our second run through the valley was worse. This time we were ready, machine guns loaded, extra ammo belts slung over shoulders, grenades clipped to vests. We moved in convoy formation tighter than doctrine allowed, and still the jungle pressed against us like a living thing. Every man stared too hard at the shadows, waiting for that scream to come back. And it did. Halfway through, just as the trucks clawed up a muddy incline, the sound tore across the valley again. Not quite animal, not quite human. Men flinched. Rifles came up. Blake barked for calm, but his voice was drowned under the growl of engines and the echo of that roar. Then came the thud of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, tracking us just beyond the tree line. We never saw it clear that time, just shapes moving in the canopy, branches bending under impossible weight. The drivers slammed through the track like devils were on their heels. By the time we broke out into open ground, men were pale, sweat soaking their uniforms despite the rain. No contact, no casualties, but every man knew we'd been hunted. After that run, talk spread fast. Other convoys reported strange encounters. One said a truck vanished from the line, swallowed by the tree line without a sound. Another claimed they found claw marks gouged into steel doors, as if something had tested its strength against army iron. Official reports listed them as accidents, mechanical failures, poor visibility. But the men knew better. The valley was alive with something none of us could explain. It was Harper who first called it the ape. He'd grown up near a zoo, said the thing we saw was like a gorilla but wrong. Too big, too fast, eyes that glowed faint in the dark. "That ain't no animal," he whispered one night. "That's something that learned men ain't supposed to see." The name stuck. After that, the Forbidden Valley had a new rumor attached: the ape that hunted convoys. We tried to make light of it. Jokes traded over sea rations, nervous laughter about who'd be snatched next. But humor only worked until the engines rumbled and the valley loomed ahead again. Then all the talk died down, and the only sound was the creak of gear and the pounding of hearts. Command never acknowledged it outright, but they knew something was wrong. They rotated units fast, making sure no single platoon ran that route too many times in a row. They doubled patrols near the entry points. Though nobody ever caught sight of what lived deeper in, the valley became a test, a silent dare from the jungle to any man foolish enough to enter. The longer we ran those convoys, the more the valley got into our heads. Nightmares spread through the barracks. Men dreamed of massive shapes looming over their bunks, of trucks torn open like tin cans, of screams echoing without end. Some guys started refusing orders outright, faking illness or begging transfer. Desertion charges loomed, but fear outweighed punishment. Better the brig than the valley. I stayed. Not because I was braver, because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Back home, the farm was gone, sold off after my uncle passed. The war was all I had, and maybe deep down, I needed to know what we were facing out there. Man or beast, spirit or monster, it didn't matter. I couldn't shake the feeling that the valley was waiting for me, for all of us. Then came the mission that changed everything. A run not just to haul supplies, but to escort engineers tasked with repairing a collapsed bridge inside the valley itself. That meant stopping, holding position, giving whatever stalked those trees all the time in the world to close in. Every man in the convoy knew it was suicide, but orders were orders, and by the end of that mission, we'd learned just how real the legends were. They briefed us at dawn like it was any other escort. 2 engineer trucks, 1 wrecker, a flatbed stacked with steel plates, and our usual line of cargo. The bridge inside the valley had slumped after a landslide, leaving a gap the local ARVN called a dead step. The engineers would shore it up, lay new decking, and mark it safe. Set perimeter, hold position, no heroics, Blake said. We keep them breathing until they say we're done. No one argued. We topped off fuel, checked belts, counted grenades twice. I slid a fresh sling on my rifle. Harper polished the lens on a battered pair of binoculars like it would save our lives. Morales tucked a tiny St. Christopher medallion into his shirt pocket and told me if I ratted him out for superstition, he'd burn my letters from home. I told him I didn't have any. He stared, then handed me a spare medallion without a word. We rolled at first light, tighter formation than usual. The gun jeep led, engines low, tires biting the wet track. The jungle met us early. Thick walls of green, vines drooping from branches, trunks leaning over us like old men. The road narrowed, twisted, then dropped. Tree roots had chewed the edges. The sky thinned to a strip. A wet hush settled in the cabs. The valley didn't like visitors. We hit the first marker at 0900, a broken sign half swallowed by brush with a faded number and a bullet hole. Blake raised his hand from the lead truck, index finger circling. Eyes up. We did what we always did. We watched the tree line and pretended our hands weren't sweating. The bridge lay around a bend carved by a river we couldn't see yet. We knew it by the sound. Slow water under cut stone, a low push against the banks. The deck came into view in slices between leaves. The center had sunk, maybe a foot, maybe more. A support beam had kicked sideways. The soil above it cleaved like a bad haircut. Not a collapse. A warning that the next heavy load would put men into the river. Set the box, Blake said. The convoy fanned out into positions we'd rehearsed in safer places. Gun jeep forward facing the left bank, second truck angled to cover the right. Cargo stayed back by the curve as reserve. Engineers rolled up, 2 men hopped down, and I caught the stiff way they moved. Not casual. Eyes low, steps quick, gear fastened tight. They'd been told what we'd seen out here. They just didn't say it. 3 hours if the anchors hold, the engineer lead said, then added, if we don't finish, nobody leaves. The river takes the next truck. He wore no rank on his blouse, just grease under his nails and a pencil behind one ear. 6 if they don't. Plan for 6, Blake replied. We're not rushing. Engineers went to work. Men with pry bars and a jack, 1 with a theodolite, 2 laying down steel plates like giant cards. Our guys took sectors and dug shallow bites for boots, not trenches, just enough to anchor while standing. Harper climbed onto the truck hood for a higher view. Morales set an ammo can next to the Jeep's pintle and checked the feed on the M60 twice, then twice more. The first hour passed clean. A few birds cut across the canopy, then veered hard like they'd hit an invisible wall. The sun fought through, smeared by clouds. Sweat dragged dirt down our necks. Someone muttered about the breeze. Another told him to shut up. We all heard it, the way wind moved in every place but here. A clatter on metal brought heads around, just a wrench dropped. An engineer laughed at himself, too loud, then looked embarrassed. My bad, he said. Nerves. Nobody answered. We didn't want to break the fragile rhythm of nothing happening. Harper's voice came low and even. Movement. Left bank. Mid-canopy. 30 yards. His tone wasn't excited. It was the kind of voice you use when your heart is doing its own war and you refuse to let it win. I brought my rifle up, blinked against the green and caught it. A gentle sway where nothing else moved. A leaf flipped against the flow of air. A single vine, taut as wire, went slack and then tight again. No shape, no face, just pressure. Like something large was testing the weight of the day. "Hold," Blake said. "Do not fire unless it shows itself." "Engineers, keep working." The men on the deck did not stop. They slowed. Hands that had moved with steady, practiced force now checked each motion, knuckles pale under grime. The lead measured, called numbers, and the jack lifted another quarter-inch with a groan. He glanced at me like I owned the jungle and could tell it to behave. I stared past him at that parting of green and didn't blink. Something knocked once against the far girder, not hard, playful, as if a child had thrown a stone. Morales shifted behind the M60. "It's bait," he murmured, trying to get us twitchy. "You reading too many books, Morales?" Harper said. "I can read the ground," Morales replied, eyes narrowing. "When there is any ground." A second knock came, a few inches farther along. We didn't see a throw. We saw the effect. A coin-sized ding and a tiny roll of rust. Whatever was in there had hands and aim. "Stay disciplined," Blake said. His voice had the roughness of a man pushing down an old fear. The jack sang up a notch. Steel plates clapped into line. If it slipped again, the center span could drop 3 inches, enough to trap a truck. River pushing below, steady and indifferent. Radios kept their low hiss. I breathed slow to keep my hands from vibrating. Then the smell hit us. Not rot, not diesel. A wild animal musk, heavy like wet wool left in a corner for too long. It rode the air in a single draft, and then was gone. Men tightened their grips, braced boots. We heard the footsteps before we saw it. Not thunder this time. Placement, soft, then firm, like a thing walking heel to toe through brush, not bothered by thorns. It kept low, kept inside blind spots, a genius at angles. 2 o'clock, Harper whispered. He lifted the binoculars and winced. "It doesn't like the glass." "What?" I asked. "Every time I bring them up, it ducks," he said. "It knows what a lens is, like it's been watching us, learning." The far brush trembled. A palm-sized stone rolled down the slope and plopped near a tire. Another skittered, tapped the flatbed, tapped again like lazy knuckles. Morales swung the barrel an inch and froze. Blake's hand lifted a fraction. "Wait." The engineers reached a point where silence stopped being a favor and became a liability. They needed to drive bolts. The lead looked at Blake, then at the torque wrench. Blake nodded once. "Do it." The first crank echoed off the river bend, metal on metal, sharp and clean. The jungle answered with a branch crack, not near, not far, just definite. The second crank drew 2 cracks in reply. By the third, we all knew we were tapping a line between sound and permission. "Pick it up," the lead said through clenched teeth. "We're halfway." A low shape slid between trunks at the far edge, then vanished. Bigger than a man hunched, shoulders curved forward, arms long enough that one hand touched the ground with each step. I caught the arc of the spine and the quick tilt of the head like it was taking count of us. Then nothing again. The best hunter is patient. The best trap pretends it isn't there. Blake shifted our positions by a few feet each, no more. Enough to change sight lines, to close angles. He didn't huddle us. He spread us, every sector overlapping. If the thing rushed, it would run into a lattice of fire. It felt smart. It also felt like laying threads over a sinkhole. "Why not call air?" Harper asked under his breath. "We did," Blake said. "Ceiling's too low, crosswinds heavy. Weather's socked in. 10 out if it clears. Might as well be a year." We all nodded at that, as if acceptance would keep the trees from moving. A sound like knuckles drumming slid across the iron under the deck. 5 beats, spaced, then a 6th too soon. It came from below, under the work. A man froze with his hand in a bolt sleeve. Another lifted his boot like the floor might open. The river chuckled on. "Below," I said, and felt foolish naming the obvious. Morales lowered the barrel an inch, then thought better and kept it level with the bank. "It's pushing us to split attention. You still reading? Harper said, voice dry. I'd rather read than pray, Morales replied. Both, I said. Pick both. We didn't see it climb. We felt the change. The breadth of the line shifted. A new weight arrived above the left bank, 30 feet up, not quite in view. Leaves quivered, then settled. A trunk flexed a fraction, the way it does when something too big for it pretends to be a breeze. Tree line, left. High, Harper said. Copy, Blake said. You see the head, you take it. Copy, Morales said. The engineers hit the drive phase, bolts torqued to seat. The wrench clacked a rhythm, steady and brave. Sweat cut clean tracks through their dust. One of them started humming under his breath, tuneless and low. The lead never looked up again. He placed his faith in our rifles. We placed ours in his bolts. The first real hit came fast. A rock the size of a canteen smashed into the side of the gun jeep, dented the panel, and clattered off into the brush. Morales flinched but didn't fire. The second hit followed. A log, not huge but heavy enough to slam into the forward truck and shear a side mirror. Men ducked. A third object fell short, a dead branch that burst into pieces at our feet. If it wanted to hit us, it could. It was choosing not to. It's testing, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. It's counting, Harper said, seeing who flinches, who moves. The jack creaked, then let go half an inch. The deck jumped. The lead cursed, jammed the bar back in place and reset the angle. 2 more pulls, he said, then plates. Then we run. Define run, Morales muttered. Run means run, Blake said. A shadow broke our edge. Not a full reveal, not yet. A hand, maybe. Fingers long enough to wrap a man's skull. Coarse hair matted with mud. The hand gripped the rail and squeezed. The iron didn't bend, but the sound of that grip carried. It was the sound of capacity. The hair on my arms rose. I exhaled, brought my sight up, and found the place where wrist met forearm. If it pulled up, if the head rose, I would have something to shoot. The hand loosened, slid away, and vanished. A second later, a bark of laughter that wasn't laughter moved through the leaves. Not joy, mockery. Enough, Blake said softly. On my mark, suppress the canopy. He looked at the engineer lead. How long? 3 minutes, the man said without looking at us. 2, Blake said. 2 if you want steel bouncing into the river, the man answered, calm as if haggling over bread. Blake swallowed whatever he wanted to say. 2:40, he replied. At 2:40, we are done here. At 2:20, the ape finally showed itself. It stepped into a gap in the leaves as if the jungle had offered it a stage. Not tall like a man, taller, shoulders like a pair of fuel drums beneath a cloak of dark hair, a chest thick as a wall, arms that hung long, heavy, sure. Its head sat forward from the spine, jaw set with an underbite that gave it a permanent scowl. Eyes, small, set deep, not glowing, nothing dramatic, just eyes that measured. It turned its gaze over us like a man counting cattle. Nobody fired. No one wanted to be first. Under the deck, a bolt squealed home. Above the bank, the ape shifted its weight, testing the flex of the branch beneath it. It knew our range. It knew our fear. Blake lowered his hand a fraction. Stand by, he breathed. The ape bent its knees and sprang. Not toward us. Past us. It sailed across the gap like a thrown shadow and caught a trunk on the far side with one hand. The tree jolted and held. It swung once, twice, then let go and landed on the deck with a sound like a truck door slammed in a garage. Down, I yelled, but nobody needed the order. The engineers flattened. The rest of us took angles, barrels chasing mass. At that exact second, the jack slipped again. The deck dipped a hair. The ape felt it through its feet and cocked its head like a listener at a joke. It crouched, placed both hands on the new plates as if feeling their temperature, then leaned its weight against the bolt we just set. The bolt held, but the message was clear. It understood what we were doing and could undo it. Morales fired first, a short, controlled burst under Blake's half-lifted hand. The rounds chewed splinters off the railing inches from the ape's shoulder and skipped into the river. The creature recoiled, not in terror, more in annoyance, and dropped to all fours. It moved with a speed that didn't belong to something so big, scuttling under the exposed truss like a crab under a dock. We poured fire into the spaces where a body might be. Chips of old paint and rust fogged the air. A ricochet whined off the flatbed and kissed the road. Blake swore and cut us with his voice. "Short bursts! Watch your fields!" A shape shot from under the deck, hit the opposite bank, and vanished into fern and vine. We held, sights high, breath hooked. The engineers crawled to the far side and hugged the stone lip like it could swallow them and keep them safe. "Status!" Blake shouted. "Bolt 3 seated," the lead answered. "Plates ready? We can cross a truck, not a tank." "Good," Blake said. "We're not a tank." A rock crashed into the rear cargo canopy. Canvas tore, a sack of rice burst, and white grains sheeted over the road like snow. The ape had circled wide and now harried our tail. Morales pivoted the M60, then stopped. No clean shot. The thing never gave one twice. "Plan's bad," Harper said, eyes never leaving the green. "It's not afraid of fire. It's learning us." "Then we teach it something new," Blake said. He snapped orders. We'd bait it. The wrecker would inch onto the bridge with 2 men hanging off the side, rattling the deck like a challenge. The rest of us would hold fire until the ape committed. When it did, we'd pin it against the center span and drive it off with concentrated burn. Not elegant and not guaranteed, but doing nothing meant waiting for it to choose the moment. "On you," the engineer-led said. His voice had lost its earlier calm. It sounded like a man making peace with his God and his wrench. The wrecker rolled forward. Chains clinked. The deck thudded with a rhythm you could feel in your teeth. 2 privates banged crowbars against the rail, steel on steel, a crude bell that said, "Come and get it." The jungle answered. Leaves split with a rush. The ape dropped from a branch to the road. More weight than grace now, more purpose than show. It planted itself facing the wrecker as if claiming the lane. Shoulders rolled once, hands flexed. It took a step. And for the first time since we entered the valley, it made a human sound. Not a word. A shape of breath that mimicked a syllable. It came out broken, jagged, but there was no mistaking it. A reach toward our language, echoing something it had heard again and again. It said, "No, just that." One sound strained through a throat built for other noises. The 2 privates holding crowbars froze, faces bleached. Morales swore a prayer. Harper's mouth opened and didn't close. The ape took another step and repeated it, louder, like a guard stopping traffic. "No!" It wasn't mercy, it was command. It was telling us a rule of its place. Blake's jaw set. "Drive," he said. The wrecker surged, engine roaring, deck shivering under load. The ape moved. It hit the front bumper with its shoulder and shoved. Steel groaned. Tires spun. The truck didn't fly backward like in a tall tale. It skidded a foot, maybe 2, enough to throw our plan into pieces. The 2 men on the side yelped. One lost his crowbar and it clanged off the deck. The ape's head snapped toward the sound. For an instant, its ear and temple filled my sight. "Now!" Blake shouted. We fired as one. Rounds stitched across shoulder and neck. The ape recoiled, swung an arm, and a bolt plate popped free and skittered like a coin into the river. It wasn't immortal, it bled. Dark spatters across the new steel. It was also angrier than we'd seen it. Rage made it reckless. Reckless meant it stepped too far onto the deck where the jack had never fully seated. The plank dipped. The ape dropped to a knee. Its hands shot out to catch the rail. Fingers found nothing but wet iron and new paint. It looked at me across the span with those deep-set eyes. Not hate, not fear. Calculation. It had a second to choose. Retreat into green or press through men and metal. It chose the third option. It dove under the deck again. "Hold!" Blake barked. "Eyes under!" The deck shuddered like something had seized the frame. A bolt twisted. Somewhere beneath us, iron wailed. The engineers grabbed the jack as if they could hold up the world with human hands. The wrecker's front wheels slid 3 inches toward the gap, and then the jack slipped for the last time. The bridge groaned down, not a full collapse, but enough to tilt the world, enough to drop our stomachs and throw aim. The ape's arm flashed up from below, hooked the wrecker's axle, and with a sound like muscle-tearing fabric began to pull. We didn't think. We moved. Men lunged for the cab, for the bumper, for anything they could grasp. Boots scraped, fingers burned. Someone screamed a name. The engine screamed back. "Cut the chain!" Blake roared. "Cut it now!" Sparks jumped as a wheelman hit steel with a torch, frantic and fast. The chain glowed dull, then bright, then parted with a snap that rang like a bell. The wrecker lunged forward, free of the drag, and the ape's hand slid off steel, leaving a streak of its blood on the axle. The truck made the span. We dragged the two privates up by their vests. The deck held, barely. The water below churned with falling debris. The jungle stilled as if it had just inhaled and was deciding whether to breathe out. We stared into the gaps, rifles twitching for another shot. The ape didn't surface. It didn't run. It didn't roar. It disappeared into the bones of the bridge and left us with a tremor in our legs that I can feel even writing this. We had a crossing, ugly and temporary. We had a wounded enemy that had just told us a word it learned from us. And we had one more problem. The engineer lead looked up from the jack, face gray. "One plate's gone," he said. "We can pass the convoy one at a time if you like gambling." He wiped his hands on his blouse and held up two broken pieces of a bolt. "And we're out of these." Blake stared into the green where the ape had vanished. He didn't blink. He didn't swallow. When he spoke, his voice had that thin wire in it again. "We're not finished," he said. "We're just inside the part where things change." He looked at me, then at the river, then at the far bank, where the canopy hung like a curtain before a stage. "Form up," he said. "We cross slow. We cross smart. And if that thing shows again, we're going to learn why it knows our word for stop." We tightened straps, counted heads, and lined the trucks for a crawl over a bridge held together by will and damaged steel. The wrecker crept first, tires whispering over plates, engine a steady prayer. Men on the far side waved it through, their arms stiff. The rest of us stared into the slats below, waiting for a shape to rise from the shadow. Halfway across, the river carried a dark patch downstream like spilled ink. It wasn't oil, it wasn't mud. It spread and thinned and then was gone. Blood. The ape bled. It could be hurt. The wrecker reached the far bank. We exhaled. The next truck rolled. The deck hummed under weight. I felt the vibration through my soles and wondered how long the luck would hold. We didn't know it yet, but that second crossing would put something new on the road with us. A piece of the valley we hadn't invited, riding our bumper like a secret. And when it finally made itself known, nothing we believed about the Forbidden Valley, or about what the war could throw at a man, would survive the next hour. The second truck made it across. Tires rattled, frame whining under strain, but it held. We clapped each other on the back as if relief could disguise the fear still chewing at our insides. By the time the third truck rolled, sweat had slicked through my shirt. My rifle strap cut a raw line in my shoulder. Each second stretched like it wanted to snap. Then halfway across, the sound came again. Not the roar, not the human word. A scrape. Iron dragged against stone, long and deliberate. The men on the far bank raised rifles. Those still waiting their turn froze. The truck driver leaned on the accelerator, but the wheels slipped against wet steel, spinning with a hollow whine. "Steady!" Blake barked. He moved to the edge, one hand raised to the driver, the other gripping his carbine. His voice carried with the steadiness of command, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. The scraping stopped. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then from beneath the bridge, a thud that rattled the bolts. The driver stomped the pedal. The truck lurched, caught traction, and rolled forward. The men exhaled together, a single ragged sound. But when it cleared the span, we saw what had been left behind. The plates we'd laid were buckled, not collapsed, not broken, but warped like something had pressed up from underneath. A message. It could touch us anytime it wanted. The convoy kept moving, no choice. Truck after truck crawled, each man praying under his breath, each axle groaning over a road that wasn't meant to last the day. When the final cargo bed reached the far side, we pulled into a tight circle, engines low, rifles out. The engineers stayed behind on the span, hammering a last brace into place, their faces drawn tight. That's when Harper called down from the flatbed. "We've got company." We followed his gaze. Not the tree line, the road. Figures stood on the far bend, where the valley curved out of sight. At first I thought it was locals, villagers, maybe ARVN stragglers. But as they stepped closer, my stomach clenched. Their clothes were wrong, not villagers, not allies, not even from our time. Old uniforms, faded, torn, web gear from another era, French. Every soldier in Vietnam had heard the stories of the French Expeditionary Force, wiped out at Dien Bien Phu in '54. Thousands dead, thousands more captured. Some said whole units fled into the jungle and were never seen again. Staring at those shapes now, I believed it. They moved slow, stiff, as though time had bent their bones. Rifles dangled from slack hands, rusted through, wood swollen from decades of rain. Faces pale, eyes sunken, expressions unreadable. The jungle had claimed them, yet here they were, stepping onto a bridge they shouldn't know still existed. Morales spat into the dirt. "No way! No damn way!" "Don't look at them," Blake said. His voice was calm, too calm. "They're not here for us." But they were. The figures shuffled forward, crossing the buckled plates as if the laws of weight didn't apply. The bridge didn't sag. Bolts didn't groan. They drifted, silent, rifles hanging, eyes hollow. One stopped in the center span and turned its head toward us. Its lips parted. A whisper floated across the water. "Retournez." The word was weak, cracked, but I understood it. "Go back." "Sir?" one of the privates asked, his voice high. "Hold position," Blake said. He didn't raise his weapon. None of us did. Instinct screamed to open fire, but some deeper instinct warned us that bullets wouldn't matter. These men weren't flesh anymore. They were echoes carved into the valley's marrow. One by one, the French phantoms crossed. When the last stepped off the span, they faded into the tree line as though swallowed by mist. The valley didn't keep time, it kept debt. The jungle closed behind them. Nothing remained but silence. The engineers packed their tools without a word. Nobody joked. Nobody laughed. We mounted up, engines loud in the unnatural stillness, and rolled forward. The bridge held. The valley had let us pass. But every man knew the price was only delayed. We made camp a few clicks down the road, where the jungle thinned enough to form a crude clearing. Trucks circled, tarps stretched, weapons checked again and again. Nobody wanted to admit how rattled they were. Men cleaned rifles until the oil ran black. Morales chain smoked until his fingers shook. Harper scribbled in a pocket notebook. Lines I never saw him show anyone. I lay against a wheel, helmet tipped low, but sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that ape's hand gripping iron, its eyes calculating, and behind it, the faces of soldiers, 40 years dead. Around midnight, the sound of boots on gravel stirred me. Not patrol, heavier, purposeful. I reached for my rifle, but Blake crouched beside me before I could speak. "Stay sharp," he whispered. "We've got movement." I followed him to the perimeter. 2 sentries stood stiff, rifles raised, pointing into the tree line. I strained my eyes. At first I saw nothing but black shapes of trunks. Then between them, a glow, faint, bluish, like the spark of a lantern carried by invisible hands. It drifted closer, weaving between trees. Then another glow appeared, and another, until a line of pale light stretched into the distance. Dozens, maybe hundreds, moving slow, deliberate, a procession. "Jesus," Harper muttered, his voice cracked. The glow stopped at the edge of camp. We could see them clearer now. Not lanterns, helmets. The faint phosphorescence clung to shapes of men. Not French this time, American. Their uniforms bore patches long since abandoned, old divisions from the earliest years of the war. Faces young, eyes vacant, jaws slack. They stared at us like mirrors warped by water. One stepped forward. His boots made no sound. Some pass through, some get stuck. Every one of them warns the living. His lips parted. The whisper reached us, dry as leaves. "Not yours." And then, like a switch thrown, they vanished. No fading, no dissolve. 1 second there, the next gone. The jungle swallowed the glow. The perimeter held still for a full minute. Then Blake straightened. "Everyone back inside now. No questions." We obeyed. No one wanted to linger on the edge of that road. By dawn, nerves were shredded. The engineers packed up and left, their convoy taking a different route out. We were ordered to push deeper, to deliver our cargo to a forward fire base tucked inside the valley. The road twisted tighter, brush clawing at tarps, mud swallowing tires. Radios hissed static without signal. The jungle was done playing. It wanted us in the dark. Around noon, the lead jeep braked hard. Men leaned out, rifles ready. The road ahead was blocked. A tree had fallen across the path. Not stormfall, not erosion, cut. The trunk lay clean, sap still weeping. Axe marks wide as my palm scarred the wood. Whatever had done it was strong enough to fell giants. "Clear it?" Morales asked, too loud. "No time," Blake said. "We winch it or we backtrack." "Backtrack," Harper said. His voice held the edge of panic. "Through the bridge again?" Blake didn't answer. His silence was worse than words. We rigged the wrecker, chain rattling as the winch bit into the trunk. The truck groaned, wheels digging trenches into mud. Inch by inch, the tree slid, then stopped. The winch screamed, gears grinding. The chain snapped. The crack echoed down the valley. Every man froze. The jungle answered with a roar. Not the scream of before, not the single word. A full-throated, rage-filled bellow that made the canopy tremble. Birds exploded from trees in a frantic cloud. Men dropped to knees, rifles aimed at shadows. The roar came again, closer, shaking the air like artillery. And then we saw it. The ape stepped onto the road, massive and unbroken despite the blood we'd drawn hours before. Its shoulders rolled with power. Its arms swung low, hands flexing. Its eyes swept over us, no longer curious. Now they burned with intent. Behind it, the jungle moved. Not just branches, not just vines. Shapes, smaller, hunched, quick. Dozens of them slipping between trunks, their outlines jagged and wrong. The ape wasn't alone. It never had been. "Positions!" Blake roared. His voice cracked over the chaos. "Form a line! Do not let them surround us." Engines revved, rifles cocked, hearts pounded. The forbidden valley had finally shown its teeth. And as the first of the shapes broke into the road behind their leader, we realized the truth. We weren't fighting to cross. We were fighting to leave alive. The road turned into a battlefield before the first shot was fired. The ape stood at the front, broad chest heaving, blocking the only way forward. Behind it, those smaller shapes shifted through the trees, fast and restless, like shadows learning how to walk. We didn't know if they were animals, spirits, or something in between. All we knew was they weren't going to let us leave. Blake's voice cut through the panic. "Form the box!" Trucks nose out, guns overlapping. "Move!" Engines roared as drivers slammed into gear. Trucks angled into a tight square. Canvas sides facing inward. Gun jeep forward. It was the only way to keep from being surrounded. Boots pounded as men scrambled into positions. Rifles braced over truck hoods. Eyes flicking between the tree line and the monster standing dead center of the road. The ape took a step, not a charge, a test. Its massive hand dragged across the dirt, leaving a groove deeper than any tire track. The smaller shapes answered with chatter. High-pitched, almost human noises, like laughter twisted inside out. Morales cursed under his breath and thumbed the M60's grip. His barrel tracked the tree line, but his eyes stayed fixed on the leader. "Hold," Blake said. "Wait until it commits." The ape roared. This one wasn't just noise. It was command. The smaller shapes erupted from the brush. Dark bodies with long arms and crooked spines, leaping low, bounding across the mud with terrifying speed. They weren't gorillas. They weren't men. They looked like warped things, knuckles wrong, spines twisted like fear itself had shaped them. They were something that should have never walked upright. "Contact!" someone yelled. The jungle exploded. Rifles cracked. The M60 thundered, spitting red tracers into the tree line. Bullets ripped through bodies, flinging them sideways, tearing leaves into confetti. Men screamed orders and curses as the swarm crashed against us. One hit the side of the jeep. claws scraping steel, teeth snapping inches from Morales' arm. He kicked it back and cut it down with a burst to the chest. Another landed on a truck hood, swinging a branch like a club. The driver ducked as the windshield shattered, glass spraying into the cab. 3 rifles answered at once, dropping the thing in a spray of blood. But they kept coming. The ape stayed where it was, watching, commanding. Every time one of the smaller creatures fell, 2 more burst from the brush. They didn't attack like animals. They probed like soldiers, testing weak points, drawing fire, trying to break our circle. Harper shouted from the far truck, "They're flanking left! Shift fire!" "Left sector," Blake barked. His carbine cracked in 3-round bursts, precise and ruthless. He fired like a man trying to keep the line of the world from breaking. I sighted one rushing between trunks, low to the ground, teeth flashing. I squeezed off 2 shots. The first caught its leg, the second its head. It spun and collapsed, twitching in the mud. My hands shook, but I reloaded without thinking. Training kept us alive when fear tried to choke us. Then the ape moved. It surged forward with a speed no man that size should have had. One leap carried it across the open road. It landed on all 4s, then rose to its full height, towering over the gun jeep. Morales swung the M60 up, but the ape swatted it aside like a toy. The barrel bent. Morales went sprawling across the hood, gasping. "Light it up!" Blake roared. Every rifle turned on the monster. Dozens of rounds slammed into its chest and shoulders. It staggered, roared, but didn't fall. Blood sprayed, dark against its matted fur, but it kept coming. Its hand shot out, seized the Jeep's front bumper, and lifted. The entire vehicle tilted, tires leaving the mud. Men scrambled back, shouting. For a heartbeat, it looked like the ape would flip the Jeep into our circle, crush us all in one blow. "Frag out!" a private yelled. The grenade clattered under the Jeep. Blake's eyes widened. "Cover!" The explosion tore the air apart. The Jeep's front end vanished in fire and smoke. Shrapnel hissed across the mud, cutting leaves, tearing flesh. The ape reeled back, arm charred, chest peppered with metal. It roared in fury, a sound that made my bones vibrate. The smaller creatures shrieked in answer, their swarm breaking for a moment of chaos. "Push them!" Blake yelled. "Drive them back!" We surged forward, rifles hammering, grenades thrown, trucks edging to widen the circle. The swarm faltered, but the ape didn't retreat. It grabbed the twisted frame of the Jeep, swung it like a club, and smashed it into the ground. The earth shook. Men dove aside, cursing. The wreck lay smoking, a monument to how little the rules of war meant here. The ape's eyes found mine for a fraction of a second. They weren't just animal. They were aware, calculating. I swear it understood what we were doing, and it wasn't afraid. Then it spoke again. That same broken voice, one word torn from a throat not made for language. "Stay!" The sound chilled me worse than any roar. This thing wasn't just hunting us, it was claiming us. "Not today," Blake snarled. He ripped the radio handset off his shoulder. "Raven, this is Convoy Charlie, Grid 2-5. Fire mission, danger close. Repeat, danger close. We need it now." Static answered, then a crackled voice. "Copy, Convoy Charlie. Ordnance inbound. Brace, artillery, our last hope." If it came in time. The ape seemed to sense it. It dropped the Jeep frame, beat its chest once, and roared. The swarm rallied, throwing themselves at us with suicidal frenzy. One landed on Harper, dragging him into the mud. He jammed his bayonet up under its chin, blood spraying his face, and shoved the corpse aside. Another clawed at my leg. I stomped its skull into the dirt and kept firing. The sky answered with a whistle, then another. Then the world split. Shells slammed into the tree line. Fire blossomed, trees shredded, bodies torn apart in sprays of blood and dirt. The ground heaved, shockwaves rattling teeth. The swarm shrieked, scattered, some vaporized where they stood. The air filled with smoke and earth. In the chaos, I saw the ape. It stood in the open, roaring at the sky, defying the fire raining down. Shells tore the ground around it, flung mud and shrapnel across its massive frame, but it held its ground. It wasn't indestructible. I saw wounds, deep and brutal, but it refused to fall. It looked at us one last time through the smoke, eyes burning with something I still don't have words for. Then it turned and leapt into the trees, one bound, two, and it was gone. The swarm followed, vanishing into the jungle like they'd never been there. Silence crashed down, broken only by the groan of wounded men and the hiss of burning brush. Our circle held, but barely. The gun jeep was gone. Morales' arm was shredded, and half the convoy shook like men who'd stared into the mouth of something the world never should have birthed. Blake lowered his rifle. His voice was steady, but his eyes were hollow. "Load up! We're moving. Now!" No one argued. We dragged the wounded into trucks, shoved ammo boxes aside for stretchers, and rolled forward on shredded nerves. Nobody looked back at the smoking wreck. Nobody wanted to see if the ape had decided to return. We left the clearing behind, engines growling, hearts hammering, each of us carrying the same thought. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. The road out of that clearing felt like the longest stretch of my life. Engines coughed, transmissions groaned, and every shadow looked like it could open up and spit that thing back onto the road. Nobody spoke, not a word. The air inside each truck was heavy with smoke and sweat, and the wounded moaned softly in the back. We were alive, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Thin, temporary, borrowed time. I sat in the second truck with Morales propped against the bench beside me. His arm was wrapped in bloody bandages, the sleeve cut open to the shoulder. He tried to crack jokes between gritted teeth, but his voice came out hoarse. "Guess I won't be opening that diner after all." "Can't flip pancakes one-handed?" I forced a laugh, though the sound stuck in my throat. Harper sat across from us, face streaked with dried blood that wasn't all his. He clutched his notebook like it was a Bible. Every few minutes, he scribbled something down, eyes glassy, lips moving without sound. Blake rode in the lead truck, radio pressed to his ear. Every few minutes, he barked coordinates, trying to keep artillery on standby in case we had to call it again. I don't know if he believed it would help. He just needed something to hold on to, a piece of order in a place that rejected order. By late afternoon, we reached the fire base, little more than a cluster of sandbags and corrugated tin roofs perched on a ridge. The men there stared as we rolled in. They saw the damage on our trucks, the burns, the shredded canvas, the faces drained of color. Questions came fast. Ambush, mortars, VC. Blake waved them off. Contact. We handled it. That was all he gave, all he could give. You don't write giant ape and ghost soldiers into a combat report. You just say, contact, and move on. Medics rushed the wounded inside. Morales went first, still cracking half jokes through clenched teeth. "Tell my girl I went down swinging," he muttered. Then softer, "Don't tell her what swung back." The medics didn't laugh. They'd seen enough to know when humor was a shield. That night we tried to rest. Tried. The fire-base generators buzzed, radios hissed, and the jungle pressed in close. I lay on a cot under a torn mosquito net, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of wood sounded like footsteps. Every brush of wind through palm fronds made my pulse spike. I thought of the ape's eyes, the way it had said stay, like it understood exactly what it was doing. I thought of the French ghosts, the American phantoms, the glow in the tree line. The valley wasn't just haunted by one thing. It was full, alive with something older than the war, older than us. Sleep never came. When I closed my eyes, I saw the convoy trapped in endless circles, the bridge collapsing again and again, Morales' blood spraying across steel, Harper screaming under claws. Every time I jerked awake, the jungle was still out there, waiting. The next morning, command called Blake into the comms tent. He was in there an hour. When he came out, his face was pale, but his jaw was set. He gathered us by the trucks, those of us still standing. "Orders are simple," he said. "Convoy pulls out tomorrow, back to base. Different route. We don't go through the valley again." Relief should have hit us like fresh air, but it didn't, because deep down, every man there knew the valley wasn't done with us. It had let us go, for now, but it had marked us. Once you see something like that, you don't just walk away, you carry it forever. We rolled out the next day under heavy guard, Extra jeeps, extra rifles, even a pair of gunships circling above. The road bent wide around the Forbidden Valley, skirting the ridge instead of plunging down into it. The jungle thinned, sunlight cut through, birds sang again. It should have felt normal. It didn't. Every man kept looking back over his shoulder, waiting for that roar, for that word, for those eyes in the trees. Nothing came. The valley stayed quiet, holding its secrets. For now. When we finally made it back to base, Command debriefed us like it was just another run. Ambush repelled, casualties sustained, supplies delivered. That was the official story. The truth stayed between us. Nobody dared write it down, not in reports, not in letters home. You don't tell your mother a gorilla the size of a truck almost flipped your convoy. You don't tell your girl that ghosts warned you to turn back. You keep it buried, the way Command wanted it buried. Some of the men transferred out soon after. Harper volunteered for tunnel rat duty, said he'd rather crawl underground with the rats than set foot in that valley again. Morales was shipped home on medical. He waved from the stretcher as they loaded him onto the chopper, that lopsided grin plastered on his pale face. I never saw him again. Blake stayed. He was career Army. He swallowed it like poison and marched on, orders in his pocket, iron in his voice. I don't know how he did it. Me, I lasted another 6 months. Convoys, escorts, endless mud and rain. I never saw the ape again, never heard its voice, but I felt it. Every time I stepped into jungle thicker than it should have been. Every time the birds went silent for no reason. Every time my boots hit mud that seemed deeper than the day before. The valley lingered like a scar across the land, and across us. When my tour ended, I went home. Ohio felt smaller, flatter, too quiet. People asked questions I couldn't answer. What was it like? They asked. I told them about the heat, the bugs, the trucks that never worked. I told them about the fear of ambush, the friends I lost. I didn't tell them about the valley. Not then. Not for years. Because here's the thing. War is supposed to end. You come home, you put it behind you, you build a life. But the valley doesn't end. It stays with you. In the way trains make you flinch, in the way shadows in the woods freeze your step, in the way you hear a word whispered in a voice that isn't human every time you're alone. Stay. That's what it told us. And it wasn't just a command, it was a curse. Sometimes I wonder if the valley is still there, waiting, if new convoys take that road and vanish without a trace, if young men sit in the mud with rifles shaking, hearing things no one will ever believe. And sometimes I wonder if the ape still walks, scarred from our bullets, older, smarter, angrier. Maybe it does. Maybe it always will. Because the truth is, the Forbidden Valley isn't just a place on a map. It's a wound. And wounds don't heal. They fester. They spread. They remind you of what's still inside you. And if you've ever been there, if you've ever seen what we saw, you know it's never over. The night before I shipped home, Blake found me sitting by the motor pool, smoking the last of Morales' cigarettes. He sat down beside me, boots muddy, uniform stiff with sweat. For a long time, we didn't speak. Then he said, "You don't talk about it. Ever. Not to anyone who wasn't there. They won't understand." I nodded, because I already knew. He was right. Some truths aren't meant for outside ears. Still, he added after a moment, it happened. Don't let yourself forget that. I promised him I wouldn't, and I never have. Years have passed since that road, but I can still smell the mud of the Forbidden Valley when rain hits the pavement. Time dulls a lot of things. The sound of artillery, the weight of a pack, the names of villages half a world away. But it hasn't dulled the memory of what we faced in that jungle. If anything, it's sharper now, like a scar that refuses to fade. I've read books, seen documentaries, listened to men argue about what really happened in Vietnam. They talk about battles, politics, strategy. They argue about who was right, who was wrong, whether it mattered at all. But none of them mention the valley. None of them mention what we saw. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't want to know. And maybe that's for the best. But I know. Blake knew. Harper knew. Morales knew. Every man in that convoy carried the same truth. The war wasn't just fought against men. There were things out there that didn't fit into after-action reports or history books. Things that had lived in that land long before we arrived, and that will still be there long after we're gone. Things that don't care about nations or flags. Things that simply are. Sometimes I wake in the night to the echo of that voice. Not the roar, the word, stay. I hear it as clear as I heard it on that road, that broken attempt at language, like it was staking its claim. I wonder if it meant stay out or stay forever. Maybe both. Maybe it didn't matter. The point was clear. The valley wasn't ours. It never would be. I tried to build a normal life. Job, house, routine. People around me wanted stories. They expected tales of firefights, heroism, maybe even glory. I gave them pieces of the truth, the safe pieces. Convoys ambushed, nights under fire, friends lost. They nodded, satisfied. They didn't need to know about an ape the size of a truck holding a bridge in its hands. They didn't need to know about ghost soldiers marching through smoke. Some truths don't belong in polite company, but when I'm alone, I let myself remember all of it. The way the bridge dipped under its weight. The way the French phantoms whispered warnings we ignored. The way the air went still before the swarm came. I remember the look in Blake's eyes when he said we'd crossed into the part where things change. He was right. After that, nothing was ever the same. I don't know if the valley still stands. Maybe it's been cleared by now, roads paved, forests cut, rivers dammed. Or maybe it's still there, untouched, waiting. Maybe the jungle reclaims every scar we left until no sign remains that we ever passed through. But I know the ape is still there. I know the valley still breathes. Some places aren't meant to be tamed. Some things aren't meant to be explained. They endure because fear gives them shape and memory gives them power. People say war teaches you about humanity, about courage, sacrifice, brotherhood. That's true, but it also teaches you about silence, about the things you can't tell, the weight you carry alone. The forbidden valley is mine, my silence, my burden, my curse. When I close my eyes for the last time, I know it'll be waiting on the other side, just as real as the day I first saw it step from the trees. If you're listening to this, maybe you think it's just a story, a ghost tale told by a tired old man. Maybe you'll laugh, shake your head, call it a soldier's exaggeration. That's fine. Believe what you want. But remember this, legends don't come from nothing. They come from something real enough to terrify men into silence. And silence is the truest evidence there is. The valley doesn't forget. Neither do I. And if you ever find yourself in that part of Vietnam, staring at a stretch of road where the birds won't sing and the air feels heavy, turn back. Don't go in, because once you cross into the Forbidden Valley, you never really leave. Part of you stays behind, and part of it comes back with you. You're still watching without subscribing? Make sure you don't miss the next story. Subscribe now and share with your friends. Tell us your country, the time you're watching, and any real-life incident like this, then post it in the comments.